Hi, everybody. My name is Bob Spearing. I'm MUFON's Director of International Development. This last week, I had the opportunity to interview Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to let you see a little bit about Dave Scott. Dave Scott is a journalist. He's been in terrestrial radio for over 20 years. He's also got his own network, Spaced Out Radio. And not only is he a journalist and a UFO researcher and a cryptozoologist, he also is an experiencer. You can catch Dave weeknights 9 to 12 Pacific time for his radio show. And he even has his own Facebook page called Spaced Out Radio. So without further ado, here's my interview with Dave Scott. Hi, Dave. How you doing?
Bob, thank you so much for allowing me to be on the MUFON YouTube channel and the network all over the place. I am a big fan of MUFON. And, one of the highlights of my career in broadcasting is when I got invited to speak at the MUFON Symposium a couple years ago in Denver, getting to meet a lot of MUFON people. What a treat that was. So to be able to do this with you is a great pleasure.
That's where I met you. I met you at Denver, and I heard you speak. And as soon as you were done, I made a beeline up to you because I was so impressed by your presentation. You asked a really, really great question on stage. Why now? Why is all of this stuff coming out right now? These whistleblowers, these admirals, these filmmakers. Why do you think now?
I have pondered that question for about 6 years. Why now? And the only reason that I can figure it out, Bob, is it's twofold. Number one, they are preparing, whoever the gatekeepers are, could be preparing us for some outlandish false flag narrative because they've run out of enemies around the world and now it's time for aliens. Okay. Now, do I believe that? No, but I keep the door open to possibility. The other thing that I believe in is this. What if the phone call came? And I'm putting it in very generalized terms. The why now for me is there was no need for any of this to come out. Okay. There was no need for Tom DeLonge and the To the Stars Academy to all of a sudden light this thing up in 2017, which was then furthered on by the New York Times article. Everybody knew this was going on. Everybody knew there were secrets, that there were videos, that there was audio transcripts, everything. So it didn't make sense to me as a journalist why all of a sudden this was coming up. Why all of a sudden were they tackling this topic like it was brand new? And look, I can see a lot of red flags right from the beginning of all of this. And if you want, we can get into a few of those. But in the end, I remember asking one insider, why now? And he said, what if the phone call was answered? And what do I mean by that? Well, what happens if there is some sort of communication between these UFO and their entities, as well as the government of the United States and maybe other governments around the world? But for conversation purposes, we'll keep it to the United States, even though many people, such as myself, are outside of the U.S., whereas for people who don't know, I live on the west coast of Canada. Okay, so the why now aspect was, what if that phone call was answered and they put a timeline on it? That's the why now. It would take years, decades for them to prepare humans for some sort of intelligent contact. People right now are not ready for it. People in the UFO community are, because we have invested in this time. But my personal belief is Joe and Jane Smith, who are more worried about paying their bills and putting food on the table and what's on their Instagram, have no clue about this subject. How would they react? I remember asking Lou Elizondo this same question. I said, during COVID, I said, were you guys studying this, the way people were treating each other during COVID? Look, I don't care if you're a COVID believer or you're a COVID denier. It has nothing to do with this conversation. What I am concerned about is the way people were treating people, the hoarding of toilet paper, the hoarding of milk and meat, and ratting out friends who had mom and dad over for Christmas. Because in some states, you were only allowed a couple people over and that was it. Or you were only allowed to have your family there and that was it. And yet neighbors were ratting out other neighbors, or businesses that didn't have a mask mandate or whatever it was. So I asked Elizondo, I said, were you guys watching and monitoring how people were treating each other and how it may happen in the UFO world? He goes, great question, Dave. And this was just on a phone call. This isn't recorded. He goes, great question, Dave. He goes, in fact, we were. And we weren't too impressed with the results. That
Yeah,
should scare you.
yeah.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I was looking back through some old APRO reports and Saga UFO magazines, and as far back as the 1960s, there were senators being briefed, and the consensus was at the time that the answer might be so horrible that humans aren't ready for it yet. And like you say, right now, the UFO community is ready for it, but I still believe that that same mantra may be in effect, that if the answer is so horrible, they can't discuss it. Lou Elizondo even intimated something like that. But that brings me to another topic that I wanted to ask you tonight about: Three Eye Atlas. Okay,
Yes.
recently MUFON on our YouTube channel and on X, we did a poll and we asked people, do you think it's a comet? Do you think it's an alien spaceship? Do you think it's Project Bluebeam or a psyop? Or do you not care? And it was interesting, only about 8% didn't care. Fewer thought it might be Blue Book. But what was really interesting was 43% of people thought it was a comet, and 41% of people thought it was an alien spaceship. So is this like a test to see how gullible we are, or how ready we might be if the real thing ever happened? What's your thoughts on Three Eye Atlas?
Well, first off, I do believe it was a comet, and I'm not an astrophysicist. I'm if science is over here, Bob, I go this way, okay? Because even though I'm a journalist by trade, I'm also an experiencer as well, and I tend to lean way to more the experiencers than to the scientists at hand. But I really took a hard listen as to what Harvard astrophysicist was saying, Avi Loeb. Okay. I thought Avi Loeb nailed it point blank. He said, I believe, and I'm paraphrasing here, he goes, I believe this is a comet, but we cannot rule out that it could be some foreign craft from another intelligent life form. He never ruled it out. Look, Three Eye Atlas was doing things that was absolutely blowing the minds of our scientists, because there was absolutely no physics on Earth that actually would make the results look understandable. Whether it was making turns or whether it was coming off the gravitational pull of the sun, but it didn't do what it was supposed to do. There are numerous pieces of evidence that really drew the attention of a lot of scientists looking into this. And for many scientists to rule it out that it could have been an alien aircraft, whether they were laughing about it, scoffing about it, or just calling people like you and me and people like Avi Loeb stupid for even bringing up such a subject, I thought it was ignorant and I thought it was irresponsible. Science is supposed to, in my little knowledge of science, but I get to talk to a lot of scientists on Spaced Out Radio. Their whole job is to look into things that don't make sense. That's what scientists do. Whether it's looking into how to combat a strain of cancer, whether it's to try and figure out how to help people grow their brain a little bit stronger or whatever it may be. That's what scientists do. They're always looking for something else, except when it comes to our field. It doesn't matter whether it's paranormal, whether it's cryptid, or whether it's UFOs. They seem to shut the door before they even want to open it. To me, that is not scientific. It is not scientific at all. This is why I really enjoyed what Avi Loeb from Harvard was saying, because even though he believed it was a comet, he said that the actions were a little bit misleading and could be something else. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I thought he was very brave to do that, to take bullets on the podium, so to speak, where he was getting hit on his own reputation for even mentioning UFOs. And yet here we are. So do I believe it was a comet? Yes, I do. Do I believe it could have been something else? Oh, God, I was hoping. Bob, I was hoping big time.
Okay, so it makes its closest approach to Earth, I believe, on December 19th, and it won't really be that close. After that, it starts heading towards Jupiter and then eventually out of our solar system. So, to go down a rabbit hole a little bit more, two things I want to ask you. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that NASA hid a lot of photos that were taken, and some people with far less sophisticated cameras were taking much clearer photos. That's the first question. Do you think NASA was hiding anything? And two, just this week in the news, it was talking about that scientists and military will be aiming our planetary defense systems towards Atlas, I guess, to monitor its actions. Why would that be necessary?
Well, let's start off with your first question. Personally, I think NASA is a joke. People need to realize there are two faces of NASA. There is the public face, the rah rah, we sent men to the moon in the 1970s. That's the rah rah NASA. Okay. But NASA really has been, lack of a better term for publicity, irrelevant since they scuttled the shuttle program. Okay. And over time, people like Darcy Weir and others have tried calling out NASA about what they are hiding regarding UFOs. And NASA works a lot like the Canadian government. If we don't talk about it, it never happened. Okay. And I say that as a Canadian. But what I mean by that is when NASA held their press conference showing the photo, they held a 2-hour press conference for one photo that any of you could have taken. All you needed was a little bit of fog and a motorcycle headlight. That's it. We waited weeks. They blamed the government shutdown the last time that they had an opportunity to photograph it. They blamed the government shutdown, yet we're getting all of these immaculate videos and photos from other space agencies as well as amateur scientists. Okay. And NASA, who's the big dog on campus, or at least still plays the role of big dog on campus, prior to the shutdown, they give us this ugly pixelated version. I mean, you might as well have had a clearer picture on your Atari 2600 back in 1983. Okay. Because that's exactly what the graphics look like of Three Eye Atlas. And then they follow it up with this absolute joke of a photo. Do I think NASA is covering up the entire UFO spectrum? 100%. Actually, no. 1,000,000%. They are a joke. They are absolute. I hate calling people liars, but their organization is a bunch of liars when it comes to our field of UFOs. I'll give you an example. Okay. Did you know Neil Armstrong and 2 other test pilots of the X-15 rocket program actually had encounters with spacecraft at around 315,000 feet on different missions, including a photograph that was caught? The first time it happened, The pilot actually radioed in, and you can look up the transcript of this. They radioed in and said that they were being followed by a craft. They said, well, maybe it's ice or space debris. The plane was going at about Mach 7, and this thing was keeping up with it. He said, no, sir, this is not space ice. It is not space debris. And in fact, it took off. And he was looking. The next time it happened, Neil Armstrong saw it. Then the final pilot who had that same encounter got a photograph of it. Where's that photo? You can actually go on any AI generator, okay, and read the public transcripts. Just type it on in, X-15 UFO encounters. You can read the NASA transcripts that have been publicized. So when NASA says nothing's going on or we have nothing to show you, don't buy it, okay? If they were in a court of law, they would be found guilty.
Okay. You made me think of something else, but let's answer the second question first. Why the planetary defenses being activated? If it's just a comet to test the
Well,
defenses?
and that I can't answer. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just a test run. It could be a test run just to see they have something interstellarly that they can lock into and lock onto to see how their computer systems work, how their AI systems work, how their defense systems work. It's the same thing when they do mock drills about nuclear weapons being fired over from Russia. That's the way I would take that, but if it was a spacecraft, and let's say hypothetically it was, they may need to see what truly is going on. And if they aren't going to be doing that, well, it's a good time for a test nonetheless.
Okay. So you mentioned the X-15.
Yes.
Early 1960s?
Yes.
Okay. So in the past several months, Ross Coulthard has been bringing up a female scientist. I can't remember her name, begins with V. And one of her theories is that there are lots of UFOs that were in orbit around Earth prior to the Sputnik launch. And what's really interesting about that is that I actually, in our Project Aquarius library, has Captain Ruppelt's personal blue book files. And he actually wrote a letter to Professor Lincoln La Paz, New Mexican University professor who studied the green fireballs, where he was asking him about an article in a magazine that there were two pre-Sputnik objects orbiting Earth. And La Paz's daughter, who was his secretary, said that her father disavowed that article, but at the same time, she didn't deny that there were two objects in orbit around Earth. And I was just looking, like I said before, at some of the old Saga magazine articles, and it was one from 1977 that speculated there were UFOs in orbit around the Earth. 1977. So is Ross Coulthard really bringing something new to the forefront, or is this something that they've known all along?
I think Ross Coulthard has stumbled on a story that hasn't been told, but has been sitting there for 50, 60 years. The only reason why it's becoming a little bit popular is because Ross Coulthard is popular.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this isn't a shot at Ross. I really respect a lot of his journalistic work. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the connections that he has built. There are so many stories out there that if you had a medium or I had a medium that would take us seriously, like a News Nation type of news outlet, we would be re-reporting on all of these stories over and over again. Whether it's the NASA cover-ups. I mean, you look, Bob, in the last couple of years, how many times have we heard about the nuclear missile silos?
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the UFO community, you've known that story since literally you were 10 minutes into it.
Right. Minot, Rendlesham, right? It's been going on for decades.
Absolutely. But they cover it up because pardon me, let me rephrase because that was wrong. these stories seem brand new to many people because of the popularity of the subject. So you have an endless amount of stories like Rendlesham, like the nuclear missile siles, like Kenneth Arnold, like Betty and Barney Hill, and many others out there that are going to seem fresh and new again, even though they're 50, 60 years old.
Mhm.
And that is what's happening is he's recycling because Ross, what I do know of him, he has not been in this community a long time. I think he's been in the community 4 or 5 years. Okay. He's not an experiencer from what we know. Okay. He's just somebody as a journalist, an investigative journalist, because there is a difference between investigative journalist and journalist. Okay. I was a journalist. He's an investigative journalist. Okay. And so with him being new in this community, and if somebody throws him a juicy story like the Rendlesham or like this story about the UFOs, it's brand new. He
Mhm.
looks at it, he's like, how can I tell that story today?
Mhm.
And to the News Nation crowd, it's likely going to be a brand new story. And you know what happens? And this is where I actually admire News Nation. Okay. One of the things Tucker Carlson said when he was with Fox News is every time they did a story on UFOs, they would see a ratings spike. And if you looked at it, when Tucker Carlson, when he was with Fox, when
Mhm.
he would do a UFO special,
Mhm.
they would pound the advertisers for more money because they knew they were going to get a rating spike.
Absolutely.
People love this subject. Here's an interesting one because you and I we're going to have to redo this, and I want to explain how the media works in with this cycle because a lot of people believe there's this fallacy story that's out there that every newsroom has a CIA agent in it to say what can be reported, what can't. No, it cannot. News is all about ego, okay? And embarrassment. A news director never wants to be embarrassed. And the UFO subject, to many of them, is still considered an embarrassing story to take seriously. That's all it is, okay? News Nation saw the spikes in ratings when other outlets did the UFO stories. For instance, the New York Times article of 2017 was the biggest selling newspaper in New York Times history next to the 9/11 collection.
That was the Blumenthal article with
That
Leslie
was the
Kean.
Blumenthal, Keene, and Cooper article.
Mhm.
Okay. They never did a follow up on it. And yet that paper sold millions of copies because of the UFOs. And that was a Saturday edition. It wasn't a Monday through Friday edition. It
Mhm.
was a Saturday edition when they stuffed the newspapers with fluff pieces.
Mhm.
Okay. I know I went off on a tangent here. Okay. But when Ross Coulthart learns about this story, they are brand new. The story is brand new to News Nation. And why not take advantage of it? And that's what they're doing.
Okay, a perfect segue into what I was going to ask you next. So, as far as Atlas goes, all right, that's new. But things like congressional hearings and Ross Coulthart bringing up stories that have been there for decades but seem new. We just had some congressional hearings. And I consider myself a bit of a UFO historian. So I have a massive collection of old books and magazines from the 50s, 60s, 70s. And congressional hearings are nothing new. If not congressional hearings, reports from NICAP or APRO to senators in 1960, all right, that people today have forgotten about. So in the last uh, congressional hearings, I believe they were in October, there was a congressman named Burleson, and he produced an unvetted video. He says he actually didn't know how he got it. It was sent to him. And it was a video of a Hellfire missile taking out some sort of round object off the coast of Yemen. And the missile actually didn't explode. It tore through the object, and smaller objects came out of whatever this larger object was. So there's a lot of theories from the arcane to the mundane as to what it is. I have my own theory, which I'll mention, but I want to hear what you think about that video first.
As somebody who does not have a military background, I rely on a number of people that I call sources regarding technology. And I happen to have a source that worked with some extremely unique technology, and that's about as accurate as I can get for you. When I talked to this person about this video, he explained it to me as such. He said he believed that the orb or whatever it was American technology. And I said, well, that as a civilian, that doesn't make sense to me, because why would you fire on your own technology?
Right.
And he said, Dave, he goes, when you are in a hot situation like these soldiers were that fired the Hellfire missile, if all of a sudden, I'm going to try and explain this correctly so I don't look like a fool. When you're in a hot battle zone of tension, the Navy isn't always talking to the Army. The Army is not always talking to the Air Force. Okay. So when something strange comes by and the Air Force or the Army hasn't said to the Marine unit, hey, we're sending over one of our drones, this is what it looks like, because maybe they don't want the Marines to know they have that technology, or the CIA sends it over. When they see something strange, the attitude of the military is it's better to shoot it down and face the wrath rather than take the consequences of that me being a weapon that is coming to unalive many American soldiers. So, in my friend's opinion, that is when the Hellfire missile went on. It locked on, but the warhead was not activated because it happened so quickly and there wasn't enough impact, or because the orb or whatever it was not a strong metal, which would have caused the detonator to impact. So
Okay.
that is what I was told. Now, whether or not that is true, I have no idea. I looked at that video in amazement as well, especially with the three pieces that kind of came off of it and seemed to be flying with the object. Now, could that have been looking that way because the video was slowed down? Because we didn't get the full effects? Maybe those pieces, as they were knocked off in another 20, 30 seconds that we didn't see, would have just crumbled into the ground. We never got that. Okay.
Right. We never got it because who knows how much longer that video would have went. The metadata behind the video has never been released to the public. So how do we know it's even Yemen, October 2024? There's no way the UFO community, like MUFON's photo analysis team, could even investigate whether or not that video is legitimate or not.
And that's the $1 million question. That's the $1 million question. They're not going to tell us.
Right.
We have to remember with all of these. Now, I'm going to look like a real bad guy here for a second, but I think there's some truth to it. And please just hear me out. And if you don't agree with me, I'm quite okay with that. Outside of maybe David Grush and Dylan Borland, I don't think there's been a whistleblower. These so-called whistleblowers that we are titling them are experiencers. See, going outside and having a cigarette while on duty during your break and looking up and seeing something you don't recognize, and maybe it is a UFO, isn't being a whistleblower. There's no difference between your experiences, Bob, what I saw when I had a black triangle over top of my house a number of years ago. There's no difference. Am I a journalism whistleblower? because I've seen UFOs? No, I'm not. I'm an experiencer. And I realize for a lot of people, it's semantics. But if we can't get the semantics correct, because we want this story to be more grandiose than what it is, and the term whistleblower actually gives it more sustainability, I can see in today's day and age with the media hype and clickbait, we're going to use words like whistleblower.
Mhm.
Now, do I believe David Grush's story? I think there's a lot of merit to it. Do I believe Lou Elizondo? I've talked to people who have military friends who've worked with Lou, who said Lou is a badass in the field and he's a good guy. Do I know Dylan Borland's story? No, but I know people who know Dylan Borland, and the emotion of his story of doing everything right and still losing his job and his pension because he reported a UFO to the Arrow program doing exactly what he was supposed to do. Okay? That's a whistleblower, in my opinion. Okay? Because he's calling them out with his experience and he could prove the records. So, do I believe overall that we're getting any truth to this? No. No, I don't. That video, the military doesn't want us to know.
Okay. I have somebody who's pretty militarily oriented, but I definitely want to go back to Grush after I make this point. When you talk about the heat of war, accidentally shooting something down, a perfect example would be, I believe it was during the 6 Day War, the USS Liberty was inadvertently torpedoed by Israel, believing it had been an Egyptian monitoring ship. So I know things like that happen in the heat of battle. My source told me that most likely the Hellfire missile wasn't designed to explode. They're about 5.5 feet long, and some of them have sort of razor blades on the edges of them meant to basically shred a human being. And in this case, they may have believed that it was a Chinese communist spy balloon monitoring American activity in the Middle East while we were working on eliminating the Houthis, and that the Hellfire missile shredded it. And basically, a lot of Zeppelins and certain types of weather balloons have smaller balloons inside them. And that when they shredded this spy balloon, it actually released the smaller balloons within it. So that's what I heard. I think the general consensus is this unvetted video proves nothing about UFOs. But
Correct.
let me go back to Grush. Grush is interesting to me. Another poll that we did on YouTube was, who do you think will be responsible mostly for disclosure? And the four choices were Lou Elizondo, Ross Coulthart, David Grush, or Tennessee Representative Tim Burchett. Lou finished last. Okay. Ross Coulthart finished second to last. And in my mind, I'm a Tim Burchett fan. I would have thought he'd come out number one. By far, most people believe David Grush would be the guy that would lead us to disclosure based on this 4-person poll. What do you think about that?
I think it's a good choice. Do I think he's going to have the ability to do it? I don't know. We have to realize there are layers to this. Okay. And this goes so far up the food chain. You know, David Grush is an appetizer. We're looking at a restaurant menu. David Grush is an appetizer, and we have no idea where the main course meal and dessert is coming from. David Grush has a lot of pull. He knows a lot of people. Does he have the intel to maybe push for it on the inside? Yes. But disclosure happens on the outside. I don't buy that disclosure is going to happen. I don't think let me rephrase. I think, Bob, if disclosure happens, I think there is a better chance for groups like MUFON, APRO, and many others to come together and cause a catastrophic disclosure over some government-controlled disclosure where they're going to come out and say, yeah, it's real, no big deal, they're not here, we found them, you know, when you make a left at Albuquerque, 2 solar systems over. Okay. I think that's the way it's going to happen. They don't want to do this because I'm going to take this example that I've used many a times on Spaced Out Radio. And not many people talk about this, Bob. You and I have talked about it privately, but I'll mention it here. There is a big difference between UFOs and UAP. Okay? UFOs are included in the UAP, but they are not looking for UFOs. My sources have told me they are interested in what UAP are, which are man-made objects. They are not interested. Yes, they have an interest in unidentified flying objects or underwater objects. Yes, they have an interest in that. But I think what's happened here is there is infighting going on the government side of things, because there are people like Tim Burchett, like Tim Burleson, like David Grush, who know that there is things out there that need to come out.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem under the UAP banner is you cannot define what is Chinese, what is Russian, what is Iranian, what is Syrian, or most importantly, what is Lockheed Martin? What is Boeing? What is Raytheon? What is British Aerospace? What is McDonnell Douglas? And every other military program that is flying out of places like Wright-Patterson, like Area 51, like 29 Palms. What are they flying? You know, when Skywatcher went out to and did their weekend Skywatch out at 29 Palms, no offense, that is one of the worst places that I would have taken the public to see a UFO.
The experiencer phenomenon is happening for a lot of people just like you all over the world. People are telling very similar stories about personal encounters with non-human intelligence. Our experiencer community is growing every day. Join MUFON, find your friends.
Why would I go to a space where they are known to test craft in the dark, like Area 51,
Mm-hmm.
that are American made from American parts, to say, oh, there's a UFO. Look what I just summoned in.
Right.
And I
Right.
believe in summoning, Bob. I really do believe in Jake Parber and the summoning. Okay? I really do. But 29 Palms? Come on.
Right.
This is where we continue to shoot ourselves in the foot.
Mm-hmm.
So getting back to your David Grush thing, do I believe he's the key holder of it? No. Do I believe he has a set of keys? Yes. Can he get it done and unlock the door? It's like one of those draws where you go to a car dealership and there's 100 keys. You choose your key, and if your key, you get one chance to unlock the lock. Okay. I don't think he has the key to unlock the lock.
Okay. You mentioned government infighting. On the public grassroots free ufology side, there's some differences of opinion. Years and decades ago, organizations like NICAP, APRO, MUFON, they used to work together. Okay. Today, we're all doing our own thing. And not only has the grassroots UFO field changed, but now there are, government entities like Arrow, and there are private corporations like Enigma. And government agencies and private corporations are under no compunction to ever tell you what they're doing with the reports that you, the public, are sending to them. One of the things I told you I wanted to talk to you tonight about is Enigma Labs recently had some play in the media, Fox News, for example, where they were talking about that there are over 9,000 reports just since August of what we would consider USOs. And I took issue with that in one of our last MUFON newsletters because they consider anything within 10 miles of a coastline a USO. And I have to say that is the most worst definition of a USO I have ever heard. Okay. I can understand using the term transmedium vehicle, which is basically a vehicle that can come from space to the atmosphere to land or into the ocean and back out again. Okay. That would be, for me, what I would consider a USO if it has the ability to go underwater, stay underwater, come back out of water. But I think it's disingenuous to call anything within 10 miles of a coastline a USO. Not only that, as far as we know, Enigma doesn't investigate anything. So these 9,000 reports, they haven't even been vetted or investigated as far as we know. And we know from historical data that probably 90% of reports that MUFON gets, that NUFORC gets, they can be debunked or identified as, you know, an airplane seen at a distance, an atmospheric density didn't let you see the wings, or a helicopter at night at an odd angle far enough away that you can't hear. I mean, there's so lens reflections in cameras. So what do you think about 9,000 USO reports that Enigma claims since August?
You're actually touching a real soft spot here because I have been watching the progression of Enigma Labs since the beginning. Okay. You go on their LinkedIn, there are very few people who actually admit to being on working for Enigma Labs. Their website doesn't show you who is organizing it. It's from a lady named Alex Smith. Okay. It is word that the reason where they got their funding from, it's alleged that Peter Thiel, the multi-billionaire owner of Raytheon, is it Raytheon that he owns? No, Palantir, funded them between $5 and $8 million to get off the ground. And yet Peter Thiel claims that he wants nothing to do with UFOs. Okay. And yet everywhere we turn, Peter Thiel seems to be involved with everything. Now, when Alex Smith went to the first Seoul conference in San Francisco, she, on her name tag, everybody was wearing those "Hello, my name is" name tags. She had her first name on there and she wouldn't put her last name on there because she didn't want the UFO community to know who she was, but people called her out on it. Okay. Add to the fact that in their original tweets that they put out, a real skeptic gentleman, Michael Huntington, and I both noticed at the same time that they were actually saying, well, you know, we don't want anything to do with government contracts. We're not about that. But if they came along, we would work with the government.
Right. Hey, right there. I want to stop you. I want to give a shout out to Michael Huntington, UFO Culture Magazine. Real cool guy.
Yes. I like Michael a lot. A lot of people don't like him, but a lot of people don't get him because he's extremely opinionated, but he's a good man nonetheless, and a good family man as well. And that, to me, is a good character. That being said, Bob, we were kind of going on that, so much so between, I think, Michael and myself and a couple others, and we weren't being rude. We were just asking questions. What does this mean? How are you saying this? This contradicts what you were saying. And the next thing you know, within a couple of days, comments were turned off of the Enigma Labs X profile. They could post, you could like it, but you couldn't comment on it. And it wasn't that we were trying to be rude, but we wanted to know, who are you? Where did you come from? And I have a lot of MUFON friends, okay, who literally, Bob, they have found their reports on Enigma Labs reporting site.
NUFORC.
They were never asked. They were never asked. They've never given permission. Okay. To me, if I were to look at journalists, and I know that Enigma Labs has a couple of people who say they're journalists but have never worked in journalism. Okay. That's plagiarism. They are taking those stories, and even though when they are presented by MUFON, they are there for the public. Anybody can grab them. Okay. But there are people who filed those reports. You still have to ask permission of those people to use their report. It's like with my news section on my website. if I were to use a Bob Spearing story and not give you credit for it, Bob, that is plagiarism. I'm stealing your work. You can sue me for that.
I've had some shootouts with people on Facebook who post my stories post my articles but leave my name off of them. All right. A lot of times they'll say to me, "I'm sorry, I got it from another source." So a lot of what we do for a living ends up getting pirated all over the place. But
Absolutely.
I looked up the address of Enigma Labs, their headquarters. And this fascinates me because it's in the East Village, Greenwich Village, New York City. And basically, and anybody can do it. They just look up Enigma where their address is and do a Google street search. And it's pretty much an apartment building over a falafel shop. So unless they have these massive servers in the basement crunching, billions of bits of, algorithm data, I just think it's a front. It's an apartment building,
I would agree with you. 100% I would agree with you. And if Peter Thiel is involved, it makes me wonder, because he is a computer genius. Okay. Are they using his servers in order to gather the data?
Right.
That will never come out because it's a private company.
Right.
Okay. One of the things that also made me suspicious, a lot of people will say, "Oh, you're just jealous," but this made me suspicious. Enigma Labs was basically out in the public for about 6 months, and they got brought in over MUFON as an authority on UFO reporting for a NASA private UAP conference. If Enigma Labs does not have anything for a reporting center, who gave the report? Who presented? Okay. When I look at MUFON, and for anybody who doesn't know me, and Bob can attest to this, I have had many run-ins with MUFON, okay, on stories and on things that I never thought was right. But the one thing that I always had for everybody at MUFON was I had respect and understanding that they are volunteers trying to do a job. And I've always been, even though it's out in the public that I've never been a fan of MUFON, I actually am a giant fan of MUFON.
I know that.
You know that we've had that conversation. But I want the public to know this, because it's okay to call something out. It's not okay if you are stealing a group like MUFON's work. Those people that MUFON has working for them, they are volunteers. And when you're stealing their hard work to make yourself look good, to make yourself look bigger than what you are, shame on you. It's wrong. It's unethical. But it goes to show that many of these corporations are trying to privatize and economically gain off of the work that real people like MUFON and other groups like APRO and NICAP are doing. And I think the public needs to be aware of that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. MUFON has been doing the Air Force's business since 1969. We are a free, open, and grassroots organization. We have 145,000 cases in our database. There's a sister association, NUFORC, National UFO Reporting Center, run by Peter Davenport. Basically, they take reports. They have a few investigators, a handful, but MUFON has 700 field investigators. We train them. Most people come from a forensic background. We have our own laboratory. We have our own photo analysis team, and we make our results public. So when people are reporting to APRO or to a private corporation, you got to think about where your report's going, who's looking at it, and what they're doing with your information. MUFON keeps all of our witnesses anonymous. And with that, I want to bring us to...
Can I just say one more thing about that? MUFON would never make you pay for their app to respond.
Right. As a matter of fact, we have a new system coming where if you submit a report to MUFON, you can actually click a box that says, do you want us to get back to you? And we will get back to the witness and tell them the results of our investigation. I can't talk too much about the system. Hopefully it's going to be ready in January or February, but it's going to be game changer. Game changer. So anyway, I keep seeing videos of you out in the wilderness of British Columbia, and you're on a hunt, you're on an expedition, and I'm going to use a dirty word at MUFON, but it's Sasquatch, and essentially MUFON is not in the cryptid business, except if it concerns a craft involvement. And that's going to be very clear in our new system. Did you see a craft along with your Sasquatch sighting? So you apparently did, and you've been on a hunt for a while now. So I'd like you to tell the audience what you've been doing, what you've been up to, and what's your progress so far.
Well, first off, I don't think there is enough time to tell this beautiful story of high strangeness, but I have an area in my area, British Columbia, and I live, for people looking on a map, I live about 6.5 hours northeast of Vancouver in a very small community of about 2,500 people. And in 1965, Canada's largest unsolved mass murder happened when an airplane blew up flying from Vancouver up to the Yukon. There was a bomb on board the plane, killing 52 people. Now, in 2018, a good friend of mine named Merle from the Paranormal Road Trippers, he came up and he's like, has this site ever been investigated? We couldn't find anything online that anybody had ever done a paranormal investigation, in 42 years, no, 52 years, pardon me. And so we did an investigation. About after 90 minutes of that happening, we actually had an encounter with Sasquatch there. So that kind of triggered absolutely everything. Now, Bob, when we go into the forest in my area, we have to watch out for a lot of wild animals. Mm-hmm. Okay. We have to watch out for wolf packs. We have to watch out for mountain lions. And in fact, I actually put some trail cams up this year at the site, and I actually got a beautiful couple of pictures of a female mountain lion walking right by my camera. Okay. We have grizzly bears, black bears, 1,500-pound moose. And believe it or not, most people who aren't familiar with the wilderness won't even know this stat. But moose actually kill more people than bears do every year in North America. Okay. They just look big and clumsy, but they're extremely aggressive and dangerous. Okay. So in 2023, we had an incident that I don't know how to explain. We had a camera crew from from Oregon up with us, an independent crew that we were doing a little bit of filming with. And on this particular night, actually, we had 2 UFO events there, not one. I forgot to tell you about the second one, Bob. Okay. The first night, this was a Friday night, I was under what they call the Estes method, where I had a blindfold on and I was wearing noise-canceling headphones, and all I could hear was a tick, 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 tick of a radio signal. Okay. I never heard any voices, but I started seeing in the blindfold a bright white orb in my purview here. And it was so bright that underneath this blindfold, I was actually closing my eyes because I didn't want to see it. It was so bright, like looking into the sun. Mm-hmm. And when I mentioned to what I was seeing, one of the guys who was watching this happen as I'm describing it points his psionics camera up to the sky and literally watches a bright white orb come down over top of us, shift into a ring, and then disappear in the trees behind us.
Wow.
I've never seen that footage, but apparently it exists. Okay. Night number 2, it was about 7:30 at night. And this is where you got to put some tin foil on for a second, people. Okay. And I do want to preface this. I'm a journalist. I'm an experiencer. I am not a researcher. Okay. I've never been a researcher. I am an enthusiast of these topics. I'm an enthusiast of the phenomena. But on this night, what happened was it was 2023. It was the sun was starting to set. It's about a 7:45 p.m. And we're walking down this trail where way off in the distance in the west, we hear a very, very large growl, about 15 seconds long, maybe a roar of a Sasquatch roaring. It was not a mountain lion. It was not a bear of any kind or species. When you live in the wilderness like I do, you know what an animal sounds like, and you know the difference between them. And wherever that creature was, and in between where we were, there was cows that were grazing. Okay, because the ranchers will just free range their cattle in order to eat the grass up, so there's no forest fires in that area. The cattle start going absolutely haywire, mooing.
Wow.
Okay, the group says, "What the hell was that?" I said, I had, you got to come up with the line for camera sometimes. I said, "Welcome to the world of Sasquatch, guys." Okay, so we start heading back to base camp down this trail. So if we're going straight on this trail, base camp is at a 90-degree angle, and here's the base. So as the crow flies, we're probably 50 yards. But to go this way and that way, we're probably 100 yards away. Okay. And as we're walking back to the trail, I remember talking to our director, Tim, and I said, "Man, I think this is the right call. I think we're going to get some action tonight." And as we're walking down the trail, God is my witness. Swear on my children's lives, a holy Bible, whatever. There were 7 of us there. We hear this deep growled grrr coming from our base camp. And we're thinking, crap, we've got $30,000 worth of camera equipment. Okay, there. All of our food is there. All of our clothing is there. Every piece of gear that we need is there. And now there's a bear in our camp. So we start hustling because our lead guy has a pointy stick that goes boom, boom. Okay, in case there is a bear. Because you do not go into that area unarmed. And I'm looking through the trees towards base camp. I'm number 2 guy in line. And I'm looking towards the trees because I want to see if a bear is coming through. And I see something brown. And I stop. And I'm looking at it. And if you were to take, the best way I can explain it, if you were to take the outside of a number 8, okay, that double roundness, and it's matte brown in color. Flat brown looks like, bottom of the toilet. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, is there hair on that? Because my first instinct is grizzly bear. Grizzly bears are dangerous. They don't mind killing people. Okay, hold on. There's no hair on it. Is it a Sasquatch? No, there's no hair on it. And then at the top left corner of it, I saw the way the sun was coming down onto whatever it was. Well, what colors make up brown? Yellow, green, white, orange, and black. And I'm looking at the sun reflect those colors off the top corner. And I stop and I say to my team, the 6 others, I said, "What is that?" A little bit more verbal and a lot more swear words than that. And I'm pointing at it. And Bob, I'm 20 yards away from this thing. Okay. And I'm pointing at it. What is that? They all come around me. What? I said, "That brown thing in the trees. What is that?" They couldn't see it. Then Samantha and Tim, the director, start seeing some movement in the trees. They move to the left. I'm still looking at the craft, trying to figure out what this thing is. The other 6 people see alien grays walking through the trees, about 5 to 6 feet tall.
Fascinating.
Okay. I'm looking at it. They're like, the grays, they're over here. The grays, they're moving through the trees. I go look. I can't see the grays. The other 6 are looking at the grays. I can't see them. I go back 15 steps to try and look back at the craft where I saw it. It is now gone. And the beings disappeared.
And the craft was like the exterior of a numeral 8?
Yes.
And brown.
And matte brown, like flat brown.
No noise, nothing.
Nothing. Now, here's the interesting part about this, Bob. Good friend of mine and a teammate on Spaced Out Radio, his name is Lee Strauss. He came up this year, and I took him out to my area for the first time. And I said, do you want to see where the UFO was? And he goes, sure. He brings out a Geiger counter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I take him into the area where the craft was. And 2 years later, he is picking up readings of radiation in the area on the moss, on the little trees that were now, I mean, they were, maybe a foot tall back then, but now they're about 2.5, 3 feet tall. He was picking up radiation on those trees and in the moss flooring. And guess what was right in the middle of the moss flooring? 2 footsteps of a Sasquatch.
Okay, I am a fan of Albert Rosalis's Humanoid Encounters, The Others Among Us series, 15 books. Wonderful guy. He tracks humanoid encounters from basically ancient times up until 5 years ago. And his books are chock full of Sasquatch accounts. Almost half of them concern a craft. A lot of these Sasquatch seem to have glowing red eyes and seem to be interdimensional and can actually disappear right in front of a witness. I would assume you would agree with those assumptions.
I do, but in a different sense.
Okay.
A lot of the First Nations people that I have talked to in this area and where I first got into these topics down near Vancouver, where I used to live, they believe that Sasquatch is some sort of interdimensional type creature, that it can come in and out. And that's why we see one footstep. And then we won't see any footsteps until maybe 30 yards down the path. And then you'll find another footstep.
Right.
Okay. And that's kind of one of the mysteries about it. Now, my area where I am, I will tell you this. It is like a mini Skinwalker Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to Brandon Fugel about it. And I've explained to him and sent him some photos of footprints that we've caught of the Sasquatch up in the tree that we've caught. Okay. I have seen I've sent him a lot of information, including the EVPs that we've got of a child, the voice of a male child giggling at us because my research partner, Tim, accidentally knocked his GoPro over and it was about to fall. And you hear this boy go, uh-oh, turn, say, mumble something, blah, 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 blah. And then he turns back and ha, 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 ha. It's all on tape. Right. And this area we've had one encounter that literally scared the daylights out of me. And that was, we believe that that a skinwalker or a Wendigo was trying to lure us into the forest by appearing as a woman's voice saying, help me, I'm over here.
Mm-hmm.
That was scary. We didn't go. The voice kept on moving. And eventually, if we're at high noon, the voice started at here at about 4 o'clock, and then went up to 3 o'clock, and eventually it went up to about 11 o'clock. That was not fun. Didn't like that. That scared me. but I mean, I've had some awesome Sasquatch appearances there. There's a lot of alien energy. A couple of intuitives that I have talked to, especially Samantha Mowat, who is like one of my right hand people, lifelong ET experiencer. For like, I can't speak enough about her. We could go into that conversation at a different time, but go look her up, samanthamowat.ca. And she believes that there are actually some sort of interdimensional portals there that the UFOs and aliens can actually fly their craft in and out of.
Mhm.
But this place is extremely special. I wrapped up my investigation for 2025 now, because the weather is just turning on us and we get a lot of snow in that area. So in May of 2026, I will be back out there, going every weekend or almost every weekend from May right through till November,
Mhm.
and to see what we get, because there is something happening there, and I need to know what it is, because it literally is haunting me.
Yeah, Northern Canada, the wilderness of Canada, fascinates me. In the MUFON database, our 145,000 cases, there are so many reports from Upper Ontario, British Columbia, Yukon, where it's nothing but forest. And people see massive dumbbell-shaped crafts,
Yeah.
small, fast movers that have been caught on video. And when we do a photo analysis, frame by frame, these objects are flying over treetops in northern Canada at 5,000 miles per hour. And they're literally the size of a beach ball. And like, what is going on up in Canada? Perfect place for UFOs or UAP to hide, right? Or practice or do whatever.
Well, there's no people.
There's no people.
Okay. So where a lot of people do not believe in the Sasquatch or the UFOs is they come from metropolises that you can barely see the sky anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They don't go into forests. Like I look at a lot of the critics about Sasquatch, for instance. They've never been in a forest.
Mm-hmm.
Their idea of going for a hike is on some little trail that's cut through, a park.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what it's like to be like at Flight 21. And if you don't mind, I would like to just plug this on my Spaced Out Radio YouTube channel. I actually have a section on there called Secrets of the Forest. Now, this area is very claustrophobic because you're surrounded by trees, shrubs, weeds, and trails that hide what could be right behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know what's coming out. It could be a mountain lion. It could be a bear. That's why we sit with pointy sticks or carry pointy sticks with us,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in order to keep us safe. We're not going to raise a pointy stick to a UFO or a Sasquatch or a dog. Well, maybe a dog man if they get aggressive, okay? But that just will be bad news for us. We're not interested in that. What we are interested in is making sure the mountain lions, the wolf packs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was out in the forest today, Bob, before we did this. I put a shell, a 2 3/4 inch shell, down beside a wolf track.
Mm-hmm.
And that wolf track was probably another 4.5 inches longer.
I saw that picture. Yep.
That picture was taken a week before. The one I saw today was
Mm-hmm.
bigger.
Wow.
Okay. So when you're dealing with wolves that have feet this big, okay, you're looking at something massive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You put that wolf on its back legs, it's probably 8, 9, 10 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If it's walking on 2 legs. Right? So you have to be careful in our area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, like when Lee Strauss came up here for the first time, okay, this past year, and I took him there. The first thing what he said was, "Oh my God, Dave, you weren't kidding. This place is claustrophobic because you're surrounded. There's one way in, There's one area to turn your vehicle around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which you have to do the Austin Powers thing with your vehicle in order to turn it around. Well, maybe not that bad, but give you an example. Okay, and we ended up investigating there for 2 days, and Lee was just like, "This is the most incredible place I've ever investigated." So, am I excited? Do I believe that there is a tie-in between UFOs and the paranormal and cryptids? 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know what that connection is? We do not.
Mm-hmm.
Is the phenomena there going to tell me what's going on? Probably not. But I can tell you this, Old Davy's going to have a great time and some great stories looking into it as I continue this investigation.
Okay, let's leave it there. Is there anything you'd like to tell people about Spaced Out Radio? How they can find you, how often do you broadcast, that type of thing?
I am on the air. I am a live radio show broadcasting to, I just did my new numbers, probably close to 300,000 people a night on terrestrial radio and social media combined. And you can find me Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, on YouTube, Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show. We're on Twitch. We're on X. We are absolutely everywhere. And I want to say a big thank you to you, Bob, for doing this. You have been a great friend and supporter of what I do, as I am of yours. And you and MUFON do absolutely great work. And anything that we could do to help you guys out, you let us know.
Thank you, Dave. It was a pleasure. And I'll see you again soon, I hope. Cheers.